The question hovers in the studio air. The audience inhales collectively. Al Pacino's eyes, those famous watchful eyes, crinkle at the corners. The room waits. A slow smile spreads across his face, utterly composed. Several audience members shift forward in their seats. 7, he says plainly. There were 7 actors and actresses. Not idle fantasies, but genuine temptations, the kind that leave permanent impressions. The host gives him a knowing look. Pacino adjusts his posture, leaning toward the microphone with the same intensity he's brought to decades of performances. I'll tell you about each one, he says, voice a gravelly whisper, one by one. He raises a single finger and begins. I've lived a long time in this business, 85 years watching it change, watching it stay exactly the same in all the ways that matter. At this age, what's left to hide? The greatest luxury of growing older is the freedom to be honest about what you've seen, what you've wanted. The cameras have captured so many versions of me, but never quite the whole truth. The rules of the game haven't changed. I speak with respect first, always. There's an art to candor without crudeness. These 7 people, they weren't conquests or trophies. They were colleagues whose talent and presence affected me deeply. Sometimes a dance of attraction matters more because it remains just that, a dance. The industry creates these intense bubbles of intimacy, 16-hour days, emotional scenes, shared vulnerabilities, and then bursts them when production wraps. What lingers is this, moments of connection that never fully resolve. 1. Meryl Streep. We circled each other during rehearsals for a benefit reading in New York 1979. A crowded green room, all exposed brick and bad lighting. I watched her prepare, watched that remarkable focus settle over her like weather. The room hummed with conversation, but she created a pocket of stillness around herself. Her technique is impeccable. The way she disappears into character while somehow remaining utterly present. I've never seen anyone work with such precision while appearing completely natural. Every choice deliberate, every gesture meaningful. Her process was like watching someone translate ancient text, reverent, scholarly, and then suddenly blazingly intuitive. During rehearsal breaks, I'd catch her mouthing dialogue silently, finding the rhythm, testing different emphases. She would transform between run-throughs, each iteration more refined, more truthful. When we finally rehearsed our scene together, the small room seemed to contract. Her eyes, pale blue, unsentimental, amused, held mine during our dialogue with such unwavering attention that I nearly forgot my next line. Something electric in the small space between responses. The brush of her hand against mine as we exchanged props felt like a current. Her voice has that quality, warm milk and whiskey, that makes ordinary words sound like secrets, meant only for you. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear, a gesture so casual yet precise, made me forget the 20 other people in the room. Her concentration created an invisible perimeter that only included the 2 of us, a private stage within the larger rehearsal space. When she laughed at something I improvised, the sound was low and intimate, a momentary break in her otherwise perfect composure. We maintained perfect professional boundaries, of course. The tension remained in the realm of unspoken recognition. After the benefit, we exchanged compliments with careful formality, both acknowledging without words what had transpired in those hours of rehearsal. Some actors shine brightest when the camera rolls, but Meryl glows in the spaces between action and cut, and that's infinitely more dangerous. Tuan Zai Zero Jessica Lange, a film festival in Venice, 1984. Late night on a hotel terrace overlooking the Grand Canal, the air thick with salt and possibility. A string quartet played something melancholy in the background, notes drifting across the water. Jessica has this rare quality of being completely unmanufactured. Her talent feels ancient, connected to something primal. No visible technique, just raw emotional authenticity that makes you forget you're watching acting. She takes risks that would terrify lesser performers, throwing herself into vulnerability with such courage that it redefines what bravery means in our profession. Earlier that day, I'd watched her during a panel discussion, speaking without pretense about the toll certain roles had taken on her, honest in a way few actors allow themselves to be. She walked onto that terrace with unconscious elegance, champagne glass dangling from her fingers, moonlight catching in her hair. Her laugh, God, that laugh, low and genuine, devoid of performance. When she speaks about her craft, there's an intensity that transforms her face, makes her even more beautiful in its seriousness. The way she listened, head tilted slightly, eyes unwavering, made every word feel significant. Her hand brushed mine as she made a point about method acting, and I felt it like a current. There's something about the timbre of her voice, that slight huskiness, that suggests secrets and midnight confessions. The perfume she wore mingled with the night air, creating a private atmosphere even in that crowded party. When she disagreed with something I said, the flash of challenge in her eyes was more stimulating than easy agreement. For an hour, we stood at the balcony edge, Venice forgotten below us, trading stories and theories about performance until the sky began to lighten. We both had partners at the time, invisible lines clearly drawn despite the electricity. At dawn, we rejoined the others with nothing but a lingering glance to acknowledge what had passed between us. Some connections burn brightest precisely because they remain unrealized, preserved in perfect potential. 3. Faye Dunaway, Along. Awards season, 1976, crossing paths at countless events. Finally alone in a quiet corner of a governor's ball after-party, the orchestra playing softly in the background. Crystal chandeliers casting fractured light across her remarkable cheekbones. Faye's dedication to her characters borders on possession. She brings such fierce intelligence to every role, such nuanced understanding of human complexity. Her preparation is exhaustive, building entire histories for characters that might only appear on screen for moments. There's nothing casual in her approach. Every gesture is considered, every reaction authentic. Her ability to convey volumes with just her eyes changed what film acting could be. During that season, her work in Network was drawing deserved acclaim. I'd watched her create that unforgettable portrait of ambition and emptiness with surgical precision. Her beauty was never the conventional kind. It was all angles and intensity and absolute certainty. The way she held herself, regal, contained, completely aware of her effect on a room, was mesmerizing. When she spoke about her work, her passion was palpable, hands moving expressively, eyes flashing. There was something both vulnerable and guarded in her presence, allowing glimpses of herself, and then withdrawing behind perfect composure. Her voice, precise and melodic, made ordinary conversation feel like carefully crafted dialogue. The slight tremble in her fingers as she accepted a glass of champagne, that rare moment of visible nervousness, was somehow more intimate than any overt gesture could be. She had a habit of leaning forward when something interested her, creating a conspiracy of attention that excluded everyone else in the room. For 2 hours, we dissected the industry, the craft, the toll of public scrutiny, finding unexpected common ground despite our different approaches. We respected the professional nature of our relationship, despite moments when conversation veered toward the personal. At evening's end, her parting words, "We should work together someday," carried a weight of possibility that lingered long after. The most powerful attraction isn't about possession, it's about recognition of something equally wild and disciplined in another. The curious thing about desire in our profession is that it's both heightened and constrained by the work itself. When you're paid to simulate intimacy, to portray passion convincingly, the line between performance and authentic feeling blurs. The scripts we never filmed, the possibilities that lived only in glances across crowded rooms, in lingering handshakes, in conversations that danced along the edge of something more, those often leave the deepest impressions. I've found that the relationships preserved in potential rather than consummation maintain a peculiar power. They never deteriorate, never disappoint. They remain perfect in their incompleteness, like scenes written but never shot. There's something uniquely cinematic about unresolved tension. It's what keeps audiences watching after all. Perhaps we're all just audience members in our own lives, waiting for resolutions that are more satisfying in anticipation than they could ever be in reality. The camera captures so much, but never the full truth. Between takes, between scenes, between projects, that's where the most interesting stories unfold. Stories too personal, too complex to ever reach the screen. These 7 people occupied that in-between space in my life. Not quite colleagues, never quite lovers. The industry creates these perfect storms of intimacy and restraint, these pressure cookers of emotion and professionalism. Is it any wonder that sometimes the attraction becomes almost impossible to resist? 4. Sidney Poitier. A chance meeting in a studio elevator, 1972. Both of us between projects. 60 seconds of charged silence as we ascended 20 floors. The mechanical hum of the elevator cables providing the only soundtrack to our unexpected encounter. Sidney's discipline redefined dignity on screen. His technique appeared effortless, but contained a precision that belied the tremendous work behind it. He carried himself with such integrity that it elevated every production, demanded excellence from every co-star. His ability to convey complex emotion with minimal movement, just the slightest shift in his eyes or tension in his jaw, revolutionized screen acting, making bombast seem crude by comparison. In that era, his presence in Hollywood represented something revolutionary, talent that couldn't be denied despite the industry's prejudices. I'd studied his performances, marveled at how he could command scenes without raising his voice, how his restraint created more tension than another actor's rage. The power in his stillness was overwhelming. He stood in that elevator with such composed presence that the small space seemed to shrink further. His voice, that distinctive cadence, musical and measured, offering a simple greeting that somehow felt profound. Those eyes that missed nothing, that had witnessed history and helped change it, met mine with quiet assessment. The controlled strength in his handshake, neither dominating nor passive, suggesting a man completely comfortable with his own power. His cologne, subtle and warm, filled the confined space between us. There was something in his posture, straight-backed but not rigid, confident but not arrogant, that commanded respect while inviting connection. When he spoke about a recent performance of mine, his observations were so incisive that I felt simultaneously seen and challenged. As we reached his floor, he placed a brief, firm hand on my shoulder, a gesture of collegial respect that nonetheless sent electricity through me. Neither of us suggested extending our brief encounter, though the potential hummed in the air between us. The elevator doors closed between us with a soft hydraulic sigh, leaving me alone, with the lingering impression of his presence. True charisma doesn't announce itself. It's the gravity that pulls everything else into its orbit while appearing to stand perfectly still. 5. Sophia Loren. We never properly worked together, just occupied the same legendary party at Chasen's in 1980, observing each other from across the room for hours before one brief electric introduction. Cigarette smoke hung in layers beneath ornate chandeliers, the room a perfect capsule of Hollywood's golden twilight. Her craft transcends technique. She possesses that rare ability to be utterly natural on camera while remaining larger than life. The emotional transparency in her performances reveals profound courage, a willingness to expose her soul when lesser actors hide behind mannerisms. Her comic timing rivals her dramatic depth, that balance of vulnerability and strength creating characters who feel entirely human despite their extraordinary beauty. I'd watched her filmography religiously, captivated by how she could be simultaneously earthy and ethereal, how she brought such authenticity to every moment. She elevated every film she touched, her presence demanding that everything around her rise to her level. She moved through that crowded room like royalty, not with arrogance but with absolute certainty of her place in the world. The famous eyes, enormous and expressive, missing nothing. Her laugh, throaty, genuine, unrestrained, drawing everyone into its warmth. The graceful gestures, the slight touch on an arm or shoulder, making whoever she spoke with feel momentarily like the most important person in the room. When we were finally introduced, her hand lingered in mine a beat longer than necessary, her gaze direct and amused. She spoke with that magnificent accent, Italian warmth wrapped around English words, making ordinary conversation sound like poetry. The subtle scent of her perfume, something classic, something that evoked Mediterranean sunshine, created a private atmosphere even in that crowded party. There was wisdom in her eyes that matched the sensuality in her smile, intelligence and passion in perfect balance. During our brief conversation, she referenced an obscure Italian film I'd appeared in years earlier, revealing an unexpected knowledge of my work that felt like a private acknowledgement. Al Pacino was not just into the ladies, he was into the guys as well. 6. Robert De Niro. The first night of shooting Heat. We stood on opposite sides of a dimly lit restaurant set at 2 a.m., both exhausted, both refusing to show it. Decades of parallel careers leading to this moment, the air charged with anticipation. Bob's dedication borders on the monastic. His preparation is legendary. I've never known anyone to inhabit characters so completely, to transform so thoroughly that even his closest friends sometimes don't recognize the man behind the performance. His commitment makes everyone around him elevate their game. The way he builds a character from the ground up, physical mannerisms first, then the voice, then the invisible history that informs every glance. For Heat, he'd spent time with real-life thieves, absorbed their watchfulness, their economy of movement. Each gesture he made contained volumes of unspoken history. Between takes, he remained half in character, preserving the tension we needed for the scene. What people don't talk about enough is his stillness, the magnetic pull of his restraint. Across that restaurant table, exchanging our first dialogue after years of narrowly missing each other in the industry, I felt something I rarely experience, the sensation of being truly seen. His focus has gravity. It pulls you in and holds you there. The slight rasp in his voice, the deliberate pause before he speaks, the way his eyes never leave yours. It creates an intimacy that's almost uncomfortable in its intensity. His hands, those expressive hands that have portrayed both tenderness and violence with equal conviction, resting just inches from mine on the tablecloth. The chemistry was palpable. Man didn't need to direct it. It was already there. In the fluorescent glare between takes, I caught him watching me adjust my performance, nodding almost imperceptibly when I found something truthful. That silent approval meant more than 1,000 compliments. We respected the boundary of our character's opposition, channeling that tension into our performances instead. Years later, watching the finished film, the electricity of that night remains visible. Two actors recognizing something in each other that few could understand. They call it screen chemistry, but it's really about recognition. One craftsman acknowledging another across the divide of a camera lens. 7. Marlon Brando. A chaotic first meeting at Francis Ford Coppola's home before The Godfather began shooting. His massive presence filled the room like smoke, the California afternoon light streaming through windows, catching dust motes swirling in his wake. Brando reinvented what it meant to be an actor. His intuitive understanding of human behavior was almost supernatural. He could access emotional truths that most performers spend lifetimes searching for. The way he worked, curious, playful, suddenly devastatingly serious, transformed how all of us approach character. His willingness to appear vulnerable, to expose his flaws, gave everyone permission to be more authentic. That afternoon, he demonstrated his famous cat exercise, embodying feline movements so completely that everyone watching forgot they were seeing a middle-aged man and not some mysterious animal. I was transfixed by the transformation. The magnetism was immediate and disorienting. Those hooded eyes, intelligent, challenging, amused, could cut through pretense with a single glance. His voice, that famous mumble giving way to perfect clarity when he wanted to make a point, commanded attention even when he whispered. There was an unpredictability to him, a sense that anything could happen when he was in the room. The casual way he touched people when speaking, a hand on the shoulder, fingers wrapping around a wrist, created instant intimacy. When he focused his attention on you, it felt like being bathed in light. His laughter, sudden, genuine, sometimes inappropriate, was irresistible, making you want to discover what else might amuse him. During the reading, he stopped mid-sentence to comment on my listening technique, moving close enough that I could feel his breath in my ear as he suggested a different approach. The hairs on my neck stood on end at his proximity, at being the sole focus of that legendary attention. We maintained a student-mentor relationship, despite moments when the air between us seemed charged with other possibilities. He took me under his wing during those early Godfather days. Guidance I treasured even as I recognized the dangerous pull of his charisma. The truly revolutionary artists seduced not just with their beauty, but with their minds, and Brando's mind was the most dangerously attractive thing about him. We exchanged only pleasantries, both aware of the world watching, both allowing the attraction to remain an unspoken acknowledgement. For years afterward, whenever our paths nearly crossed at industry events, I felt that same pull, that same recognition from across crowded rooms. Some stars shine too brightly to approach directly. You admire them from a distance, understanding that their power lies partly in their unattainability. I've lived a full life, built a career playing men of passion and principle. Off-screen, I've tried to maintain the latter without denying the former. These 7 people, they weren't just beautiful faces or talented colleagues. They were moments of possibility, roads not taken, chemistry preserved in amber. They represent different chapters in my life, different versions of myself encountering something, someone extraordinary. Hollywood creates these perfect pressure cookers for attraction, intense working conditions, emotional vulnerability required by the work itself, beautiful people pretending to be in love for the cameras. The boundaries blur. The pretend becomes real, if only for moments. What you're watching on screen is sometimes authentic desire carefully contained within professional boundaries. Other times, it's consummate acting, making you believe in a connection that never existed. The magic lies in not knowing which is which. Did I behave myself? Mostly. Did I regret the restraint? Occasionally. But there's something to be said for desire that remains unconsummated. It never disappoints, never fades, never becomes ordinary. The memory stays pristine, unmarred by reality's inevitable complications. These 7 people remain perfect in my memory precisely because we never crossed those lines, never risked the magic by testing it against reality. After all, in our business, what's left unsaid often speaks the loudest. The scenes we never filmed might be the ones we remember most vividly. And at 85, I've learned that some fires burn brighter for never being fully extinguished.